Okay, hi and welcome to this tutorial video which is really about getting you started in Unity for the very first time. So this video is intended for people who are in my intermediate game development class fall 2020 at NYU Game Center. So I'm Professor Mitu Kandekar. If you happen to have found this video some other way, then feel free to follow along, but there might be some things which are specific for the class. But overall, this is a video which is very much intended for people who haven't used Unity at all before. So this is really kind of getting you up to speed with what Unity really is, what it does, all the different pieces to it. Unity is a tool that's been around for a while now. I've been using it for at least, I want to say like 7, 8, 9 years now. And it's really changed a lot over that time. And so, there's been a lot of things added to it. So it can be a little bit overwhelming when you first load it up. But this tutorial is intended to really just get you comfortable with working in Unity. One of the things that I always love to stress about Unity and just working in it is that it's not just for people who are going to be doing the actual coding within games. Getting up to speed in Unity is important for a range of folks in game development. So whether you're doing art in some way or design, it's really, really important. For instance, so in addition to being a professor at NYU Game Center, I'm also CEO at Glow Up Games. So at that studio, we're currently making a rap simulator game. So just to give you an example, we have a rapper on the team who is Samus, who's an incredible MC, and she uses Unity as well to implement the sort of rap verses and design that she does in there. So no matter what your role is in game development or what you see your role as being in game development, Unity is just a really great tool for you to be familiar with. Okay, so this tutorial is specifically intended for Unity version 2019.4 LTS. What that means is so the LTS stands for long-term support. So what that means is it's a stable branch of development of Unity. So as with all kinds of software development, including the games that you'll be working on, obviously, if you've done any kind of game development, you know that there's sort of, different versions of the software that you can put out. You can make some changes, put it out, and then, after testing it a little bit or getting other people to test it, you realize, oh, there's bugs in it and all kinds of things. The LTS branch of Unity is intended to be one where it's like, okay, this is sort of a more stable branch. So it's really good for people who are intending to use it for released games. So I want to get you comfortable with using Unity LTS version. So that's why we're using 2019.4. So what this is that we were looking at right now is Unity Hub. So hopefully you've already got the LTS version of Unity installed. If you haven't, and you've installed some previous version of Unity, what you can do is go to add here in Unity Hub, and you can go ahead and add it from here. It's grayed out for me right now because I've already got it installed, obviously. But you can also, this is really cool, like Unity Hub is actually really useful for just having multiple versions of Unity on your machine at a time. So right now on this particular laptop, I have two different versions, two different LTS versions actually. But you can have more, obviously, depending on if you need to use different versions, if you're going to be, so for some developers, you might be working on multiple different projects at the same time, and all the different projects might be using different versions of Unity. So that's why it's really useful to just be able to have a central place that you can see all your different installs of all the different versions of Unity. And then if you go to the Projects tab, it will basically show all the different projects that you've got in all the different versions. Hub is also useful because it has some direct links to different tutorials, community features, etc., etc. Anyway, that's enough about Unity Hub. I want to dive right in because that's quite a lot of preamble to get started. So what I'm going to do is click on New, and what we're going to do is just start. Oh, this is just opened on my second monitor, so let me go ahead and see if I can move this window. Yes, there we go. So usually when you click New, this is the window you'll see. So this is where you can define, okay, am I working in a 2D project, a 3D project? Do I need to install... Oh, you can also install different sort of prefab game projects from here as well. We're not going to do that. What we're going to do for the purposes of this example, and indeed if you're taking intermediate game dev, you're going to be working in purely 2D. One of the nice things so Unity is actually pretty good these days at doing 2D games. It kind of used to be a nightmare. Like when I started using Unity back, in goodness knows what the version number was back then, like Unity 2, Unity 3, I want to say. I think it was Unity 2. 2D was basically just a fake version of 3D. So basically you would make a 3D game and just lock the camera so it looked like a 2D game. And it meant a whole bunch of things were a nightmare. These days, thankfully, it's a lot easier, a lot better to just get started with a 2D game. So that's what we're going to do. So this is what I'm going to do. Select 2D, and then I'm going to give this a project name. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this my first 2D project. Give it a location, so you can put this wherever you want to. It's basically gonna create a subfolder with this name in whatever location you define, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and click create that bit because it takes a little while sometimes for projects to just get started when you're creating a project for the first time, or if you're opening somebody else's project for the first time on your computer, it can just take a little, just a couple of minutes to load up. So anyway, when we go into a blank 2D Unity project for the first time, it'll look a little something like this. So let me just walk you through what all these different things are, because this can look sort of just confusing and nondescript because there's nothing there. So let's just go into what each piece of this is. So an important thing to note in Unity is that you have the concept of your project assets, right? And an asset is a word commonly used in game development to just mean files, right? So it's any files. It could be images, it could be 3D models, it could be fonts, it can be absolutely anything. It could be like, text files. And also just, scripts as well, right? So C# scripts. All of those things are what we call assets. So what we have down here is the project pane. So what this says is, okay, here are all the assets that exist in the project. So in here, you'll see that there's literally just one. So the assets folder, by the way, is like the top level folder in your project. So anything that goes in your game at all, or lives in like the hard drive space that your game takes up, but by not actually be in the game, goes in the assets folder. So we have just one folder in assets right now, which is scenes. And if we click on this and double click, you'll see there is just one scene, and that is sample scene, which so happens to be the scene that we have open right now. So this is another important concept in Unity. So Unity has this concept called scenes. And you can think of a scene as like a collection of different objects that exist in that particular section of the game. The most obvious way to think of that is that it's like one level of a game. So one level of a game could be a scene. But you can use it, you'll see it's actually much more flexible than that. Like that's a really oversimplified way to think of it. But scenes can have lots of different use cases. But anyway, but you always need to be working in a scene of some kind. And we have this empty blank scene called sample scene with nothing in it except for a main camera. So if I click on this main camera, you'll see that there's a couple of things that happen. So we have this little camera preview, which shows up in the bottom right-hand side. And we also have this right-hand pane over here, which was kind of blank before, has populated with a bunch of info to do with the main camera. So let's just backtrack a little bit. So over here, this is what we call the scene hierarchy, or just the hierarchy. So what this lets us see is all of the objects that exist within a scene. And then if we click on an object within that scene, we go and see info about it in what's called the inspector, which is this right-hand pane over here. Now, this is where I'm going to explain to you sort of the building block of Unity and its whole sort of paradigm and how it works, which is this what's called a game object, right? So a game object in Unity is basically just any object, right? So it's the building block of Unity, and you'll see here that this camera, this main camera, is actually a game object, except game objects have on them different components which tell it how to behave. What I mean by that is if I close these two things, so you see there's this component on this game object of main camera called a transform, and there's a component on main camera called just camera. So these are different components that live on a game object which tell it what it does, how it's supposed to behave. And this transform component is one that every single Unity game object needs to have. So it's like the one component that exists across every type of game object that exists in Unity, with a little caveat, but we'll come to that much later on. You don't need to worry about it right now. But all you need to know is that Unity is made up of a bunch of game objects with components on them. And if you just take away one concept, that's what you need to know. So the transform is a component that exists on all game objects, and that's because it tells it, okay, where does it exist in the scene in terms of its position. So you'll see it's got these different properties on the game object. So it's got position, it's got rotation, and it's got scale. So all of these are actually just a collection of X, Y, and Z numbers, basically, right? So we know that the position of the camera in this scene is X is 0, Y is 0, and Z is -10. You might be thinking, okay, wait a minute, this is a 2D game. Why on earth is there a Z axis? This is actually the one thing where even if you're working in 2D in Unity, it still kind of betrays its roots as like a 3D game engine, because transforms will have X, Y, and Z components, properties for all its components. So the camera is at X is 0, Y is 0, but it's actually just set back a little bit from the rest of the objects in the scene. It's at Z -10. And -10 is actually kind of, if you imagine, right, you have your x-axis, your x-axis, your y-axis, and your z-axis, which is kind of going like into the screen. The z is -10 is actually what's sort of, if you imagine, like closer to you as the viewer, right? So anyway, getting into the weeds a bit too much on that. So this transform component is one that exists, as I said, on every single game object. This camera component, again, is just a camera. It's a bunch of behaviors that sort of tell the camera how to behave. This camera component is what makes the main camera a camera. It wouldn't be a camera without it. This is under the hood. This is actually just some code. It's a script that exists in Unity that tells the camera how to behave. So the camera knows that it should have a background color, for instance. So you see here this background property. If I click on it, and I'm sorry, all my windows are opening on my second monitor, but so this camera background property allows you to set the background color of the camera. So by default, this is like the Unity default blue color, which I just like really hate because it reminds me of like a project that you've just started and you haven't done any work on. But if I change this, I'm going to change this to a nice like purple color. We can change it right here. And you can also just set, you can use this color wheel, you can set the RGB values right here. And it's got a bunch of other properties as well, which you don't have to worry about too much. The final component that exists on the main camera is this audio listener, which is basically telling Unity, okay, we are ready and waiting to receive game sounds. And we'll go into that more later. So anyway, what have we looked at so far? So Unity is made up of game objects which have components on them. And components are the sort of basic sort of unit which tell Unity how to behave in different ways, or tell that game object how to behave, I should say. Right, so we're not drawing, so right now on this camera preview, so if you select the main camera, you see this camera preview, there is like literally nothing going on in the scene. This is a very, very empty game. So let's remedy that. Let's start adding some sprites to the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Assets, Create, and then I'm going to go down to, let's see, so I'm actually going to go down to Sprites over here. So it was Assets, Create, and Sprites. And you'll see that by default, Unity has these 6 what we call primitives, or 2D primitives. All that means is that just they're primitive, or we call them like primitive shapes, which means that they're basic shapes. So we have square, we have triangle, we have diamond, we have hexagon, we have circle and polygon. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and create, let's say I create a diamond. So what you'll see here is that I clicked on that, and what it did was add a new asset to the project, but it's not in the scene just yet. And that's a very important distinction. So your project will contain everything that your game needs, even if they don't show up in a scene. But you need it to be available in the project to be able to put it in a scene. So that's what we're going to do next. So literally, I want this diamond to just show up like in the middle of the scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and drag it over here, and you'll see that this diamond is now over here, and I can just like drag this around, and I can resize it. I can do all kinds of things to it, and you'll see actually as I'm resizing it, a couple of things are happening. So the scale, if you look over in the inspector, the scale is changing. And also the position is changing. I can also change the position just like this. And so these are also just numbers I can manipulate directly as well. So I can be like, okay, actually I want this to go back to 0, 0. And I want this, the scale of this, actually I want this to be like 5 by 5. There we go. And then I can also use, so I can use a bunch of different properties of this other component. Actually, yeah, let's step back. Let's look at components again. So basically what happened when I dragged this diamond into the scene is that it created a game object. And remember, Unity is just made up of game objects which have components on them. And scenes are also just made up of scenes are basically a collection of game objects. So over here, if I click on this diamond game object, it's got a couple of different components on it. So it has this transform component, and it has, which, obviously every Unity game object has, as we talked about, and it also has a sprite renderer. Now, a sprite renderer is a component which tells this game object, hey, your job is to draw a particular sprite to the screen. Render a particular sprite to the screen, hence it's called a sprite renderer. So in this case, what it's saying is, oh, I'm going to render, my job as this game object is to render this diamond image to the screen and give it a color. By default, it's white. We can go ahead and change that. I'm going to change this to, I guess I'll change it to like a blue color. And, you know, there's all these other settings as well, which I'll come back to in a second. But this sprite renderer is drawing this diamond sprite to the screen. So actually, if I click on this, right, as you see as I'm clicking on this, it is selecting this asset over here, which actually, if I click on this, you can see here, spoilers, it's actually just a PNG file. So what Unity did was went ahead and created a PNG file, which is just like a diamond. So this kind of clues you in. We're not going to do it right now, but it clues you into how you can draw all kinds of different sprites to the screen. So you can create a sprite in Photoshop and use a sprite renderer to draw that sprite to the screen. Okay, so if I click on this again, oh wait, that color did not save that I set, so I'm going to do that again. I'm going to say, okay, I want this to, oh wait, you know what I didn't do? Sorry, I was being, I was just being wrong there, so I am going to, I'm going to select a part of the color wheel, and then I'm going to set the sprite color. So there we go. So now, if I click on the main camera, we can see that against our deeper purple background, we have this pink diamond that has showed up. So actually, one of the cool things is that we can just keep on. If we want to add another diamond, we don't need to go all the way into assets, create, and create, you know, another diamond. We already actually have a diamond asset in our project, right? So what we can do is go ahead and just add another diamond in here. So this is basically another game object that's just been created. This time, to avoid sort of a naming conflict, it's been named diamond 1 by default, but this is another diamond that's just showed up. And you can actually rename game objects really easily. I'm gonna actually just name all my game objects. So this first one, I'm gonna call it diamond _0. We like to count from 0 in development, of course. And then I'm going to call this diamond _1. And then with this one, I'm going to just enlarge it again. And I'm going to put it over here. So this actually brings up, now we've got 2 diamonds in the scene. And I can also just create another one. And actually, I don't have to like drag, when I drag this diamond over, oops, hold on. There we go. When I drag this over, I don't have to put it in the scene. I can actually just place it in here. And then if I drag an asset into the scene hierarchy, rather than dragging it into the scene, what I can do is just, you know, make sure that it's positioned at 0, 0 by default. One other thing that I would recommend, actually, and I should have said this before, but this layout here, actually, I don't super love, because I can't always see how things are going to be looking in real time in the game. So this over here, what we've been looking at over here is the scene view. That is not necessarily what the game will look like. This, if we click on this tab over here, which is game, this gives you a better idea of what the game will actually look like when you play it. Now, I love to see these side by side, so I'm going to actually just go ahead and drag. I can either do this and put it here. That's kind of weird in terms of the aspect ratio, so I'm going to drag it here. And actually, that's something you'll find. You will probably find your own preferences for how you do all of this stuff, and where you put your different sort of pieces of Unity known as like panes, right? So like this is the scene view, this is the game view, this is the inspector panel or inspector pane, and you can just put these wherever makes sense for you. I'm very much in the habit of just having my scene and my game side by side like this, so I can see when I put things in the scene, I can see, okay, this is what it looks like when it's rendering to the camera. Okay, so actually this leads me on to another point. So, I've got like a bunch of diamonds in here, and I'm going to keep just renaming them go with the naming convention I'm establishing, which isn't necessarily super great right now, but we'll make it more meaningful as we go. Why did I call that 4? It should be 3. Okay, so I'm going to give these all different colors. So a couple of quick things I just want to point out to you. I'm going to make sure this is different colors still. So let's make this like, oh, that's yellow. This one is, oh, this one's the one that's white. So I'm going to make this like, there we go. Like, let's make it green. Okay, so we've got a bunch of objects, bunch of game objects, which have sprite renderers on them. So they are basically drawing sprites to the screen. Let's say I wanted to actually make sure that my my pink diamond is in front of everything else. So maybe my pink diamond needs to overlap everything else. How would I do that? This is where this particular property of the sprite renderer comes into play. So under additional settings, you'll see that there is this setting called order in layer. So what this means is that the lower the number, so you'll see that all of these, if I select each one of these, and I can just sort of use my arrow keys to go up and down, they all have order in layer 0, which means that we can't actually guarantee what is going to draw on top of what else. The order in layer is a number which determines, okay, which one of these different objects, these different sprites are behind and which is in front. The higher the number, the closer to the camera it is. So if I select this and make this 4, right, it draws on top of everything else. If I set it to 1, it's also going to be, because 1 is higher than 0, obviously, so it's still in front of everything else. But if I set this to 1 and I set this to 2, you'll see that because this has the higher number, it's drawing on top of everything else. So you can use this to determine what goes in front of what else. Cool. So let's add some other shapes, right? So I've just shown you adding like this diamond asset. I'm going to create a bunch of other assets as well. So I'm going to say GameObject. Sorry, not GameObject. I'm going to go to Asset, Create, and go into Sprites. And I'm going to create, I can create a square. I'm just going to put in all the different primitive shapes for a second. So I'm going to say, I'm going to select square. I'm going to do a circle. And you'll see it's just creating sprites, assets, which are basically just a bunch of different PNG files, right? So circle.png, diamond.png, square.png. So if I wanted to put a circle in my scene, I can just drag it in. I can put this square in the scene, and so on and so forth. Now, let's say that I wanted to move this cluster of diamonds all around. I can do a couple of things. So I can, if I wanted to move an individual game object, right, I can just drag it around the scene like this. If I wanted to move all my diamonds around, I can, like, I could do this and I can like select all of them. All I've done here is just select one, and then you can shift select the others, or just shift select the bottom one, and you can select multiple things at once. So I can move all these around like this. A better way of doing it, if there are a bunch of objects that need to be grouped together like this, I recommend actually creating them, making them a child game object of another parent game object. What do I mean by that? So I'm going to go into this sample scene, and I'm going to go to GameObject here, or I can right click here and go to this, which is create empty. So I can select create empty here, which is actually the same as if I go to GameObject and create empty up here. But I'm going to call this diamond parent. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all my diamonds, and I'm going to put them under diamond parent like this. So I just dragged all of them onto the name diamond parent, and it basically made all of these diamond shapes child objects or children objects of this diamond parent. And then if I just select this one diamond parent, I can change the coordinates of this. Like I can either do it here, and I can like, you know, I can also just like change these numbers on a slider here. If I hover my my cursor over the name, I can change them directly. Or if I go and select this move tool here, I can move them just like this. So that's a really easy way to move a bunch of game objects at once. Okay, so that is showing you just the basics of creating primitive shapes within Unity, putting them together. And actually, one other thing I want to shout out is this white square here. You might have seen and guessed from this already, but this is the bounds of the camera. So Unity does show you sort of where the bounds of the camera are. So if I like select the diamond parent again, and if I start moving it over here, you'll see that it gets out of the range of the camera. So it doesn't show all of it anymore. So it's a good way to just, as you're in the scene view, reference where the bounds of the camera are. Cool. So that is just a really quick tour around the basic components of where everything is in Unity. So remember, Unity is all about the game objects, right? So game objects are made up of components which tell that game object what it does. So it could be a sprite renderer, it could be a camera, but they all have different transforms which tell them where in the scene they should go. So actually on that note, last thing I'll show you quickly here is you can actually change the camera as well. You can move the camera around. So, you know, you can think about contexts in which you might use that. So that is it. So for those of you in my intermediate game dev class, the homework for this week is to create a representation, a 2D representation of a space that might be your, you know, it might be your dorm room, it might be a place in New York City, it could also be a place anywhere else, but I'd like you to recreate a representation of a place that you know, could be of any scale, but create that representation in 2D using at least 200 primitive shapes. Now actually a quick trick I'll show you. You don't have to keep like dragging in things all the time. What you can do is just right click on an object and go to duplicate, right? And by duplicating an object, you can just work a little bit faster. Make sure to give things meaningful names as well, but try to recreate a place on a 2D plane. But think about it this way. Think about how you can recreate it so that you're thinking of it as a level in a 2D game. So how would you turn that place? It's kind of a level design exercise in part. How would you turn that place into a 2D level for a game? All right, I will leave it there.